welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. This is inside the 1922 committee room. This is where it's all happening tonight. The 359 Conservative MPs have now registered their vote as to whether they have confidence in Boris Johnson. That number includes Boris Johnson himself, who had to decide whether he had confidence in himself. We're joined now by Piers Cable, former leader of Liberal Democrats. Great to see you.
Thanks, Piers.
Looking, I have to say, extremely rested, tanned, full of energy. Yeah. Is that what happens after you stop being a leader?
Yeah, retirement and all that. Yeah.
What do you make of all this? What's going to happen, do you think, in 10 minutes?
Well, I'm a bit unfashionable in my views. I think Boris will win, probably, and I suspect his supporters brought this division on. They could have waited a few weeks, but now is probably the best time to have it. There's some bad news coming down the
by-elections are going to go wrong. Yep.
There was momentum building up against him. So have the vote now, take it on. And then he's got a year's grace, probably. And, you know, we know he's a politically very clever guy, great communication skills. He can possibly turn it round. I mean,
well, he's the ultimate slippery eel,
yeah, the greasy pig.
Every time you think something's going to stick to him, off it slides, and he just barrels on, which, in a way, is a political skill.
No, I would have some money on him, actually.
Would you?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Grace, I mean, he could just come through this stronger than ever because, of course, if he comes through with a reasonable majority, he'll claim complete vindication. He'll say Partygate is now officially over. The rebels have tried. They will have to back off. They're going to have to, you know, just suck it up for at least a year unless they change the rules, which I think is unlikely. So Boris would live to fight another day. That could happen.
It could, and I think Boris himself has learned that he can basically come through almost anything. He can lie, he can get attacked, he can come through scandals and survive. I think partly that probably stems back to his upbringing. You don't go to Eton and Oxbridge and come through the British establishment without knowing a little something about how to kind of come through scandals. But I also think it is just the fact that he has come through so many now. He seemed able to lie throughout his career. He seemed able to... I mean, really, if you look back over the last several years of the Conservative Party, of this government, it's not just been the Partygate scandal. We've had the Greensill scandal, which in my opinion was far, far worse. It exposed kind of corruption at the heart of the British state. You had all this stuff about his wallpapers. You had everything that was going on during the pandemic. You've got now the massive cost of living crisis, which really should be what we're talking about. And he has just been able to basically cast all of this off and consistently... You basically start culture wars, throw, you know, news stories onto the table, throw dead meat to journalists and say, let's fight about something rather than talking about the issues that matter. And it could work again.
Isabel, I mean, is he basically our version of Donald Trump now, where truth isn't that important to his political success because people factor in that he's, that he's pretty loose and free with it?
Well, that's sort of what Sharon was saying earlier, but I think there's scales of lying, isn't there? And, you know, this man is a pathological liar, and at some point I think the voters become repelled by that. On the issue of the rules, the possibility of them being changed, that's not as distant as you might think. There are elections coming up for the 1922 committee. They actually have it in their gift to change the rules. So that year that he's supposedly safe for, come September, that might not look quite so secure.
Well, let's go to TalkTV's political editor, Kate McCann again. Kate, we're literally maybe 4 or 5 minutes away now from getting this result. Are you getting any more feeling about where it may go, or are we all literally in the dark here?
Well, everybody is literally in the dark because the only person who knows is Sir Graham Brady, who's the chair of the 1922 committee. My understanding is that he was going to drop the Prime Minister a line just before he announces that result at 9 o'clock so the PM can be aware of exactly what's happening. I think it's fair to say, as Harry was saying to you just before, Piers, it's fairly jittery here. Things have got a bit louder. People have started to come to camera points to react to that vote. But, you know, Number 10 sources saying that the reaction of Deanna Davison, we were talking about her earlier on, the Red Wall MP who's said tonight that she is going to vote against the Prime Minister, she's going to vote no confidence, that was a bit of a wobbly moment, that has worried them slightly. They are now very concerned about what other MPs might do, other so-called quiet MPs who haven't been as public about their views. They thought they could rely on her. Clearly they couldn't. There may well be more the same. They're saying, for what it's it's worth, that a two-thirds result, so two-thirds of the party backing the Prime Minister, would be a pretty good result for them, but also admitting behind the scenes that anything lower than that, so any less than two-thirds of MPs backing the Prime Minister, is going to look very difficult indeed. I think there are wild ranges when it comes to how this is going to play out for him, but anything 150, 180 is starting to look quite tricky.
I mean, I've got Vince Cable here. He's very bullish on Boris. He's said that he'd put money on him surviving and thriving.
Well, look, I think that's probably fair. I think Vince Cable's probably right. The Prime Minister may well win this vote, and he may well go on to move forward as the leader of the Conservative Party as the Prime Minister. But I think there is a question now about whether this is the beginning of the end, because remember, those two by-elections loom. They are not far away. The promise he made today to his MPs in the 1922 committee, I'm a winner, I can do this again. If you back me, better times are still to come. Well, if they lose those two by-elections, that's going to look very difficult. And we've been talking all day long about the fact the 1922 committee rules say if he wins this vote tonight, he's safe for a year. Well, I wouldn't bet money on that, because the 1922 committee earlier this year discussed changing the rules so you could have two votes, one every 6 months. They could well do that if they want to, because, as I say, it's convention, not rules.
Vince Cable, I mean, you're a betting man and you would bet that he will survive this and carry on. But should he, is a different question.
No, from a national interest point of view, no. I mean, for the reasons you set out earlier, you've lost the trust of the public, you've made laws and not followed them, you've treated the public as idiots. I mean, I think for the whole issue of public standards and ethics, the answer is no. But in terms of the Conservative Party, I mean, he may be the best that they've got. I mean, he's holding this coalition together.
Right, but should any serving Prime Minister who is fined by the police in this country for breaking his own lockdown rules, should any Prime Minister survive even that moment?
No, and from the wider public interest, obviously the answer is no, but this is not what the vote's about. I mean, they're choosing the best leader that they can produce, and, he does hold this Conservative coalition together. It's not at all clear who can do better.
What happens if he survives this, and then we discover that Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner get fined by the police for what they did with the curry and the beers, and they've already pledged to resign?
Well, he may well, and that actually, in a strange way, may help the Labour Party. I mean, Starmer's done his work, he's detoxified it, he's got rid of the Corbynites, and there are quite a few very talented people, mainly women, on their front bench who could be a bit more charismatic than he is. So actually, that may not be a bad outcome for Labour.
So it could help the party. Yeah. We've got 6 seconds away now from 9 o'clock. We were told to expect the result at 9 o'clock. So here's Big Ben, right at the heart of our parliamentary democracy. It is 9:06 seconds, and there's nothing. Come on, Sir Graham Brady. You've tormented us all evening. Where are you, man?
Maybe it's a tie.
Oh, Vince Cable raising the spectre of it being a tie, which would be unthinkable. I have no idea what happens in that eventuality. But the reality is we're now watching live scenes from Parliament and the 1922 committee. We are waiting to hear the result. People are back in. This looks like Sir Graham Brady has got his result, and we're about to hear it. Let's go live and just listen in.
Good evening. I can report as returning officer that 359 ballots were cast, no spoiled ballots, that the vote in favour of having confidence in Boris Johnson as leader was 211 votes, and the vote against was 148 votes. And therefore, I can announce that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
Well, there's the result. It's 211 in favour of Boris Johnson, but 148 Conservative MPs voted against their own Prime Minister tonight, which I would say is an incredibly high number. Let's go to Adam Boulton. Adam, your take on that result?
Well, that's 58% of the votes in favour of Boris Johnson. So that clearly is just a little bit better than Mrs Thatcher when she was forced out on 55%. But it's considerably worse than Theresa May, who got 66% of the votes cast. And remember, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Cabinet Minister now, said then that that was not a vote of confidence, that she should resign. It's also less than John Major got. So this is a bad result for Boris Johnson. Of course, he lives to fight another day, and he probably, of his predecessors, Thatcher, Major or May, is more inclined to try and fight it out. But obviously 148 is bad news. I mean, we were hearing earlier on from the Boris Johnson camp that they were hoping to keep the number of rebel MPs below 100. Well, they've failed by a factor of 50% on that. So what happens next? It looks like Mr Johnson will struggle on. It looks like there's going to be this issue of what happens to Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. If they resign, that will clearly put pressure on him, given his own behaviour. Then we could have those by-elections, and if he loses both of those, Conservative MPs will appear to have gambled on a loser. And of course, at the end of this, if he's still there once the Standards Committee has looked into this, there's the whole question of whether he lied to Parliament. So it looks to me as if we're going to get the continuing agony of Boris Johnson, and it does seem to me that with a third of his party not backing him, more than a third of his party not backing him, 40% in fact, that, he is heading towards a very difficult few months, and it's very unlikely that he'll be able to move on and concentrate on all that government business his loyalists keep on telling us about, but he will stay.
Right. Let's just for recap then. So 359 Conservative members of Parliament voted tonight and have voted confidence in the Prime Minister. Here's the result from Sir Graham Brady.
I can report as returning officer that 359 ballots were cast, no spoiled ballots, that the vote in favour of having confidence in Boris Johnson as leader was 211 votes, and the vote against was 148 votes. And therefore, I can announce that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
Let's go to Vince Cable. Vince, I mean, I would say 148 of his own MPs voting against him. That's not a good night for Boris Johnson, surely.
No, it's not a good night, except he has survived, and we know that this, very unlike the Theresa May dissidents, who were united, knew what they wanted, and were very organised and committed. His opponents in his own party are very fragmented. There's no clear alternative. So he has survived, and I would expect he will continue to survive. It may be bad news for the country. I think it's good news for Keir Starmer and Ed Davey. They've now got a weak,
so much to go at,
they've got a wounded opponent now.
I mean, Ed Davey's emerging as the sort of knight in shining armour of British politics, isn't he? The only untouchable. He's not been tarnished by Partygate at all.
Well, indeed, yeah.
Isabel, give me a snapshot reaction to this result.
I think it's the worst possible result, actually, for the Conservative Party, certainly for the country. A great result for the Labour Party, because this agony will go on and on and on. Any idea that this has somehow put the issue to bed is absolutely for the birds. Think of all those people that have publicly come out today within the Tory party for the first time, blistering letters of no confidence. You can't take that away. They've put it in writing. That's not going to suddenly kind of evaporate because there's been some kind of consensus. There isn't a consensus here. It's just a majority, and not a good one at that.
Grace, it seems to me, if you were using a shipping analogy, the boat has been holed, and we're just not quite sure how quickly it's going to tumble to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I said before, Boris could quite easily, well, not easily, but he could conceivably stumble through this. He could protect himself. He could basically just carry on as though nothing has happened, get to the point of the next election, be confident in the fact that there's no clear successor to replace him, that, as Vince was saying, that his opponents are not united. Whether or not this does actually end up being good for the Labour Party is, I think, a big question here, because we're going to have effectively several years of non-government. It's like all the news is going to be confined to what's going on within the Tory party and then the stuff that they chuck out to keep us busy chatting whilst they go about their business. The question is, can Labour construct a narrative about where we should be going? Because Keir Starmer has not done that effectively thus far. So unless he can actually say, what should we be doing right now? Where should we be going as a country? How should we be solving the cost of living crisis? Then it's not actually going to benefit Labour. We could end up going back to a situation like we had before 2018 of just hung parliaments and constant kind of procedural...
I mean, if you are Labour, though, you might be thinking to yourselves, let's just keep Boris there, because that might be the best chance we ever win in the election. Joining me again is TalkTV's political editor, Kate McCann, who's with Tory MP and Boris supporter Mike Wood.
I am, Piers. I have to add, just on those numbers, you were having a really interesting chat there with Adam about them. Remember, there were around 174 people on the payroll, so who were essentially paid or had an advantage to backing Boris Johnson. If you take a look at those numbers with the number who have eventually supported him, that only is around 35 additional. Now, that's not great for the party. So, as you say, let's ask Mike Wood about that, because he is here with me. Mike, you obviously do support the Prime Minister. You can't be very happy with these numbers, are you?
Well, I think I said beforehand that I thought that anything more than 210 would be a solid result. 211 is obviously in line with that. It's majority. The party rules say that in order to replace a leader, you need a majority voting to have no confidence. Instead, it's a clear majority saying that they have confidence in Boris Johnson to remain leader of the Conservative Party. And now he does need to get back to focusing on those important issues facing the country and the world at the moment.
It's a pretty whopping number, though. It's well over a third, higher than most people expected. The party were saying this morning they wanted to keep it under 100 rebels. They haven't managed that by a long shot. How on earth is Boris Johnson going to bring people back together now?
Well, Kate, you were here at the time of the last leadership election. You remember on that fifth ballot, when it was blindingly obvious that Boris Johnson was going to be in the final two, he still only got 51% of Conservative MPs. He got 160 Conservative MPs voting for him in that fifth ballot at a time when he was clearly going to be in the final two. So he's built, there's a further 51 who've supported him tonight.
But
on
that's
top
not
of the
a great
numbers that
record,
backed
is
him
it?
in the
If the
leadership
Prime Minister
election.
says that he's had a good pandemic, he's made all the big calls right, it's not really great to only have added that number of MPs, and when over a third of your own party still think he's the wrong man for the job.
Well, no, I think it's clearly over half have voted that they want him to remain as leader of the Conservative Party and as Prime Minister. There are really big issues facing the country at the moment that go well beyond some of the issues that have obviously been raised over the last few weeks. We need the Prime Minister to be supporting people with the cost of living, as he has been doing. We need him to be continuing to lead the Western world in resisting Russian aggression in Ukraine, and we need him to be focusing on helping our businesses, our schools and our NHS to rebuild after the COVID pandemic. That's the important work. All the things that we were elected to do in December 2019, we need to build on that progress, remind people why they voted for a Conservative government with a clear majority, and I know that Boris Johnson is the best leader of the Conservative Party to deliver on that and the best person to lead the country going forward.
Mike Wood, thank you very much. There you go, Piers. That's the argument of Conservative MPs tonight. Mike Wood at PPS there. Now, producer Victoria is just going to nip in and get Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who is the Trade Secretary, mic'd up. So if you want to have a quick chat to her, because what's really interesting now is this number of MPs, this scale that was above what the party was really hoping to see, 148. That means that the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks are going to be really difficult for the Prime Minister. We saw a hint of that today. He was talking in the 1922 committee about a potential announcement on tax cuts, about focusing on policy going forward. But I think things are going to get very difficult for him now. And Anne-Marie Trevelyan joins us here. Anne-Marie Trevelyan, you are the Trade Secretary. You're in Boris Johnson's cabinet. How does it feel tonight to know that many of your own MPs don't support him?
So I'm glad that we are the other side of the vote. I know that the Prime Minister spent all day listening to those colleagues who had those concerns, and he will have heard from them where those areas of policy were that they feel he needs to focus on. And as you say, there are some really big areas of policy that we want to drive forwards, both in the energy revolution, infrastructure investment, really importantly, tackling the cost of living crisis and making sure that we bring forward policies that make a difference to all our constituents day in, day out. There is so much to do. Obviously, we were elected on a very broad manifesto in 2019, the challenges of COVID and the emergency situation that we had to deal with. And the Prime Minister led not only the UK in delivering a vaccine, but the world in finding solutions, demonstrating that he has that incredible capacity to push through in really hard situations. I know that tomorrow morning he will be drawing together all those thoughts and really putting forward a package of measures and policy direction which are going to help the UK really move forwards at pace. I'm really excited about it.
So does that mean tax cuts next week then?
I wouldn't dare speak on behalf of the Chancellor, Kate. You know that would be an absolutely death sentence for anybody, but I hope very much that we will see the Treasury looking across the piece and broadly forwards how we can drive forward what is a conservative, a clear conservative policy framework always, which is to make sure that we leave as much of our hard-earned cash in the pockets of those who've earned it. That's always been a Conservative philosophy, and we need to make sure that we pay down some of the costs we've had to pick up through COVID, but I know that the Chancellor and Prime Minister will want to drive that forwards in due course.
I know that you're here in support of the Prime Minister. I know that you're going to say that he's doing the best job and that he can move forward from this, but the reality is going to be really, really difficult. Do you honestly believe that Boris Johnson can bring this fractured party back together and fight the next election?
Yes, I really do, because he has always demonstrated that when we're in really difficult circumstances where there are many, many competing forces, he has an extraordinary clarity, he has an ambition, he has a bold perspective, and he has a confidence in the British people, which is reciprocated from them. And I know that going forwards now, this is passed, this vote is passed, he will want to pick all that up and drive forwards, make sure that we are delivering for all those who voted for us back in 2019.
Anne-Marie Trevelyan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
So, Piers, interesting to hear the views of the Cabinet and the fact that Anne-Marie Trevelyan is saying now that Boris Johnson has the confidence of the country, but he doesn't necessarily have the confidence of all of his MPs. I think it's going to be a watch and wait and see how he makes it through the next couple of weeks.
Yes, I think it certainly is. Thank you, Kate.